Chapter 19. An Unexpected Visitor. The Comte de la Roche had just finished déjeuner, consisting of an omelette fine herbe, an entrecôte bernaise, and a savarin au rhum. Wiping his fine black moustache delicately with his table napkin, the Comte rose from the table. He passed through the salon of the villa, noting with appreciation the few objets d'art which were carelessly scattered about. The Louis XV snuff-box, the satin shoe worn by Marie Antoinette, and the other historic trifles that were part of the Comte's mise-en-scène. They were, he would explain to his fair visitors, heirlooms in his family. Passing through onto the terrace, the Comte looked out onto the Mediterranean with an unseeing eye. He was in no mood for appreciating the beauties of scenery. A fully matured scheme had been rudely brought to naught, and his plans had to be cast afresh. Stretching himself out in a basket chair, a cigarette held between his white fingers, the Comte pondered deeply. Presently, Hippolyte, his manservant, brought out coffee and a choice of liqueurs. The Comte selected some very fine old brandy. As the manservant was preparing to depart, the Comte arrested him with a slight gesture. Hippolyte stood respectfully to attention. His countenance was hardly a prepossessing one, but the correctitude of his demeanour went far to obliterate the fact. He was now the picture of respectful attention. "It is possible," said the Comte, "that in the course of the next few days various strangers may come to the house. They will endeavour to scrape acquaintance with you and with Marie. They will probably ask you various questions concerning me." "Yes, Monsieur le Comte." "Perhaps this has already happened." "No, Monsieur le Comte." "There have been no strangers about the place, you are certain?" "There has been no one, Monsieur le Comte." "That is well," said the Comte dryly. "Nevertheless, they will come, I am sure of it. They will ask questions." Hippolyte looked at his master in intelligent anticipation. The Comte spoke slowly, without looking at Hippolyte. "As you know, I arrived here last Tuesday morning. If the police or any other inquirer should question you, do not forget that fact. I arrived on Tuesday the 14th, not Wednesday the 15th. You understand?" "Perfectly, Monsieur le Comte." "In an affair where a lady is concerned, it is always necessary to be discreet. I feel certain, Hippolyte, that you can be discreet." "I can be discreet, monsieur." "And Marie?" "Marie also. I will answer for her." "That is well, then," murmured the Comte. When Hippolyte had withdrawn, the Comte sipped his black coffee with a reflective air. Occasionally he frowned. Once he shook his head slightly. Twice he nodded it. Into the midst of these cogitations came Hippolyte once more. "A lady, monsieur." "A lady?" The Comte was surprised. Not that a visit from a lady was an unusual thing at the Villa Marina, but at this particular moment the Comte could not think who the lady was likely to be. "She is, I think, a lady not known to monsieur," murmured the valet, helpfully. The Comte was more and more intrigued. "Show her out here, Hippolyte," he commanded. A moment later, a marvellous vision in orange and black stepped out onto the terrace, accompanied by a strong perfume of exotic blossoms. "Monsieur le Comte de la Roche?" "At your service, mademoiselle," said the Comte, bowing. "My name is Mirelle. You may have heard of me?" "Ah, indeed, mademoiselle, but who has not been enchanted by the dancing of Mademoiselle Mirelle? Exquisite." The dancer acknowledged this compliment with a brief, mechanical smile. "My descent upon you is unceremonious," she began. "But seat yourself, I beg of you, mademoiselle," cried the Comte, bringing forward a chair. Behind the gallantry of his manner, he was observing her narrowly. There were very few things that the Comte did not know about women. True, his experience had not lain much in ladies of Mirelle's class, who were themselves predatory. He and the dancer were, in a sense, birds of a feather. His arts, the Comte knew, would be thrown away on Mirelle. She was a Parisienne, and a shrewd one. Nevertheless, there was one thing that the Comte could recognize infallibly when he saw it. He knew at once that he was in the presence of a very angry woman, and an angry woman, as the Comte was well aware, always says more than is prudent, and is occasionally a source of profit to a level-headed gentleman who keeps cool. "It is most amiable of you, mademoiselle, to honour my poor abode thus." "We have mutual friends in Paris," said Mirelle. "I have heard of you from them, but I come to see you today for another reason. I have heard of you since I came to Nice in a different way. You understand?" "Ah?" said the Comte softly. "I will be brutal," continued the dancer. "Nevertheless, believe that I have your welfare at heart. They are saying in Nice, Monsieur le Comte, that you are the murderer of the English lady, Madame Katherine." "I? The murderer of Madame Katherine? Bah! But how absurd!" He spoke more languidly than indignantly, knowing that he would thus provoke her further. "But yes," she insisted. "It is as I tell you." "It amuses people to talk," murmured the Comte indifferently. "It would be beneath me to take such wild accusations seriously." "You do not understand." Mirelle bent forward, her dark eyes flashing. "It is not the idle talk of those in the street. It is the police." "The police? Ah." The Comte sat up, alert once more. Mirelle nodded her head vigorously several times. Yes, you comprehend me. I have friends everywhere. The prefect himself." She left the sentence unfinished, with an eloquent shrug of the shoulders. "Who is not indiscreet where a beautiful woman is concerned," murmured the Comte politely. "The police believe that you killed Madame Katherine, but they are wrong." "Certainly they are wrong," agreed the Comte easily. "You say that, but you do not know the truth. I do." The Comte looked at her curiously. "You know who killed Madame Katherine? Is that what you would say, mademoiselle?" Mirelle nodded vehemently. "Yes." "Who was it?" asked the Comte sharply. "Her husband." She leant across to the Comte, speaking in a low voice that vibrated with anger and excitement. "It was her husband who killed her." The Comte leaned back in his chair. His face was a mask. "Let me ask you, mademoiselle, how do you know this?" "How do I know it?" Mirelle sprang to her feet with a laugh. "He boasted of it beforehand. He was ruined, bankrupt, dishonoured. Only the death of his wife could save him. He told me so. He travelled on the same train. But she was not to know it. Why was that, I ask you? So that he might creep up on her in the night. Ah!" She shut her eyes. "I can see it happening." The Comte coughed. Perhaps, he murmured. "But surely, mademoiselle, in that case, he would not steal the jewels." "The jewels," breathed Mirelle. "The jewels! Ah, those rubies!" Her eyes grew misty, a faraway light in them. The Comte looked at her curiously, wondering for the 100th time at the magical influence of precious stones on the female sex. He recalled her to practical matters. "What do you want me to do, mademoiselle?" Mirelle became alert and businesslike once more. "Surely it is simple. You will go to the police. You will say to them that Monsieur Katherine committed this crime." "And if they do not believe me? If they ask for proof?" He was eyeing her closely. Mirelle laughed softly, and drew her orange and black wrap closer round her. "Send them to me, Monsieur le Comte," she said softly. "I will give them the proof they want." Upon that she was gone, an impetuous whirlwind, her errand accomplished. The Comte looked after her, his eyebrows delicately raised. "She is in a fury," he murmured. "What has happened now to upset her? But she shows her hand too plainly. Does she really believe that Monsieur Katherine killed his wife? She would like me to believe it. She would even like the police to believe it." He smiled to himself. He had no intention whatsoever of going to the police. He saw various other possibilities, to judge by his smile, an agreeable vista of them. Presently, however, his brow clouded. According to Mirelle, he was suspected by the police. That might be true, or it might not. An angry woman of the type of the dancer was not likely to bother about the strict veracity of her statements. On the other hand, she might easily have obtained inside information. In that case, his mouth set grimly, in that case, he must take certain precautions. He went into the house and questioned Hippolyte closely once more as to whether strangers had been to the house. The valet was positive in his assurances that this was not the case. The Comte went up to his bedroom and crossed over to an old bureau that stood against the wall. He let down the lid of this, and his delicate fingers sought for a spring at the back of one of the pigeonholes. A secret drawer flew out. In it was a small brown paper package. The Comte took this out and weighed it in his hand carefully for a minute or two. Raising his hand to his head with a slight grimace, he pulled out a single hair. This he placed on the lip of the drawer and shut it carefully. Still carrying the small parcel in his hand, he went downstairs and out of the house to the garage, where stood a scarlet two-seater car. 10 minutes later, he had taken the road for Monte Carlo. He spent a few hours at the casino, then sauntered out into the town. Presently he re-entered the car and drove off in the direction of Mentone. Earlier in the afternoon, he had noticed an inconspicuous grey car some little distance behind him. He noticed it again now. He smiled to himself. The road was climbing steadily upwards. The Comte's foot pressed hard on the accelerator. The little red car had been specially built to the Comte's design and had a far more powerful engine than would have been suspected from its appearance. It shot ahead. Presently he looked back and smiled. The grey car was following behind. Smothered in dust, the little red car leapt along the road. It was travelling now at a dangerous pace, but the Comte was a first-class driver. Now they were going downhill, twisting and curving unceasingly. Presently the car slackened speed, and finally came to a standstill before a bureau de poste. The Comte jumped out, lifted the lid of the tool chest, extracted the small brown paper parcel, and hurried into the post office. 2 minutes later, he was driving once more in the direction of Mentone. When the grey car arrived there, the Comte was drinking English 5 o'clock tea on the terrace of one of the hotels. Later, he drove back to Monte Carlo, dined there, and reached home once more at 11 o'clock. Hippolyte came out to meet him with a disturbed face. "Ah, Monsieur le Comte has arrived. Monsieur le Comte did not telephone me by any chance?" The Comte shook his head. "And yet at 3 o'clock I received a summons from Monsieur le Comte to present myself to him at Nice, at the Negresco." "Really?" said the Comte. "And you went?" "Certainly, monsieur. But at the Negresco they knew nothing of Monsieur le Comte. He had not been there." "Ah," said the Comte. "Doubtless at that hour Marie was out doing her afternoon marketing." "That is so, Monsieur le Comte." "Ah, well," said the Comte, "it is of no importance. A mistake." He went upstairs, smiling to himself. Once within his own room, he bolted his door and looked sharply round. Everything seemed as usual. He opened various drawers and cupboards. Then he nodded to himself. Things had been replaced almost exactly as he had left them, but not quite. It was evident that a very thorough search had been made. He went over to the bureau and pressed the hidden spring. The drawer flew open, but the hair was no longer where he had placed it. He nodded his head several times. "They are excellent, our French police," he murmured to himself. "Excellent. Nothing escapes them." Chapter 20. Katherine makes a friend. On the following morning, Katherine and Lennox were sitting on the terrace of the Villa Marguerite. Something in the nature of a friendship was springing up between them, despite the difference in age. But for Lennox, Katherine would have found life at the Villa Marguerite quite intolerable. The Kettering case was the topic of the moment. Lady Tamplin frankly exploited her guest's connection with the affair for all it was worth. The most persistent rebuffs that Katherine could administer quite failed to pierce Lady Tamplin's self-esteem. Lennox adopted a detached attitude, seemingly amused at her mother's manoeuvres, and yet with a sympathetic understanding of Katherine's feelings. The situation was not helped by Chubby, whose naive delight was unquenchable, and who introduced Katherine to all and sundry as, "This is Miss Grey. You know that blue train business? She was in it up to her ears. Had a long talk with Ruth Kettering a few hours before the murder. Bit of luck for her, eh?" A few remarks of this kind had provoked Katherine that morning to an unusually tart rejoinder, and when they were alone together, Lennox observed in her slow drawl, "Not used to exploitation, are you? You've got a lot to learn, Katherine." "I'm sorry, I lost my temper. I don't, as a rule. It's about time you learned to blow off steam. Chubby's only an ass. There's no harm in him. Mother, of course, is trying, but you can lose your temper with her until kingdom come, and it won't make any impression. She will open large, sad blue eyes at you and not care a bit." Katherine made no reply to this filial observation, and Lennox presently went on, "I'm rather like Chubby. I delight in a good murder, and besides, well, knowing Derek makes a difference." Katherine nodded. "So, you lunched with him yesterday?" pursued Lennox reflectively. "Do you like him, Katherine?" Katherine considered for a minute or two. "I don't know," she said very slowly. "He is very attractive." "Yes, he is attractive." "What don't you like about him?" Katherine did not reply to the question, or at any rate not directly. "He spoke of his wife's death," she said. "He said he would not pretend that it had been anything but a bit of most marvellous luck for him." "And that shocked you, I suppose?" said Lennox. She paused, and then added in a rather queer tone of voice, "He likes you, Katherine?" "He gave me a very good lunch," said Katherine, smiling. Lennox refused to be sidetracked. "I saw it the night he came here," she said thoughtfully. "The way he looked at you. And you're not his usual type. Just the opposite. Well, I suppose it's like religion. You get it at a certain age." "Mademoiselle is wanted on the telephone," said Marie, appearing at the window of the salon. "Monsieur Hercule Poirot desires to speak to her." "More blood and thunder. Go on, Katherine. Go and dally with your detective." Monsieur Hercule Poirot's voice came neat and precise in its intonation to Katherine's ear. "That is Mademoiselle Grey who speaks? Bon. Mademoiselle, I have a word for you from Monsieur Van Alden, the father of Madame Kettering. He wishes very much to speak with you, either at the Villa Marguerite or at his hotel, whichever you prefer. Katherine reflected for a moment, but she decided that for Van Alden to come to the Villa Marguerite would be both painful and unnecessary. Lady Tamplin would have hailed his advent with far too much delight. She never lost a chance to cultivate millionaires. She told Poirot that she would much rather come to Nice. "Excellent, mademoiselle. I will call for you myself in an auto. Shall we say in about 3/4 of an hour?" Punctually to the moment, Poirot appeared. Katherine was waiting for him, and they drove off at once. "Well, mademoiselle, how goes it?" She looked at his twinkling eyes and was confirmed in her first impression that there was something very attractive about Monsieur Hercule Poirot. "This is our own roman policier, is it not?" said Poirot. "I made you the promise that we should study together, and me, I always keep my promises." "You are too kind," murmured Katherine. "Ah, you mock yourself at me. But do you want to hear the developments of the case, or do you not?" Katherine admitted that she did, and Poirot proceeded to sketch for her a thumbnail portrait of the Comte de la Roche. "You think he killed her?" said Katherine thoughtfully. "That is the theory," said Poirot guardedly. "Do you yourself believe that?" "I did not say so." "And you, mademoiselle, what do you think?" Katherine shook her head. "How should I know? I don't know anything about those things. But I should say that—" "Yes?" said Poirot encouragingly. "Well, from what you say, the Count does not sound the kind of a man who would actually kill anybody." "Ah, very good," cried Poirot. "You agree with me. That is just what I have said." He looked at her sharply. "But tell me, you have met Monsieur Derek Kettering?" "I met him at Lady Tamplin's, and I lunched with him yesterday." "A mauvais sujet," said Poirot, shaking his head. "But les femmes, they like that, eh?" He twinkled at Katherine, and she laughed. "He is the kind of man one would notice anywhere," continued Poirot. "Doubtless you observed him on the blue train." "Yes, I noticed him." "In the restaurant car?" "No, I didn't notice him at meals at all. I only saw him once, going into his wife's compartment." Poirot nodded. "A strange business," he murmured. "I believe you said you were awake, mademoiselle, and looked out of your window at Lyons. You saw no tall, dark man such as the Comte de la Roche leave the train?" Katherine shook her head. "I don't think I saw anyone at all," she said. "There was a youngish lad in a cap and overcoat who got out, but I don't think he was leaving the train, only walking up and down the platform. There was a fat Frenchman with a beard, in pyjamas and an overcoat, who wanted a cup of coffee. Otherwise, I think they were only the train attendants." Poirot nodded his head several times. "It is like this, you see," he confided. "The Comte de la Roche has an alibi. An alibi, it is a very pestilential thing, and always open to the gravest suspicion. But here we are." They went straight up to Van Alden's suite, where they found Knighton. Poirot introduced him to Katherine. After a few commonplaces had been exchanged, Knighton said, "I will tell Mr. Van Alden that Miss Grey is here." He went through a second door into an adjoining room. There was a low murmur of voices, and then Van Alden came into the room and advanced towards Katherine with outstretched hand, giving her at the same time a shrewd and penetrating glance. "I am pleased to meet you, Miss Grey," he said simply. "I've been wanting very badly to hear what you can tell me about Ruth." The quiet simplicity of the millionaire's manner appealed to Katherine strongly. She felt herself in the presence of a very genuine grief, the more real for its absence of outward sign. He drew forward a chair. "Sit here, will you, and just tell me all about it." Poirot and Knighton retired discreetly into the other room, and Katherine and Van Alden were left alone together. She found no difficulty in her task. Quite simply and naturally she related her conversation with Ruth Kettering, word for word, as nearly as she could. He listened in silence, leaning back in his chair, with one hand shading his eyes. When she had finished, he said quietly, "Thank you, my dear." They both sat silent for a minute or two. Katherine felt that words of sympathy would be out of place. When the millionaire spoke, it was in a different tone. "I am very grateful to you, Miss Grey. I think you did something to ease my poor Ruth's mind in the last hours of her life. Now I want to ask you something. You know Monsieur Poirot will have told you about the scoundrel that my poor girl had got herself mixed up with. He was the man of whom she spoke to you, the man she was going to meet. In your judgment, do you think she might have changed her mind after her conversation with you? Do you think she meant to go back on her word?" "I can't honestly tell you. She had certainly come to some decision, and she seemed more cheerful in consequence of it." "She gave you no idea where she intended to meet the skunk, whether in Paris or at Hyères?" Katherine shook her head. "She said nothing as to that." "Ah," said Van Alden thoughtfully. And that is the important point. Well, time will show. He got up and opened the door to the adjoining room. Poirot and Knighton came back. Katherine declined the millionaire's invitation to lunch, and Knighton went down with her and saw her into the waiting car. He returned to find Poirot and Van Alden deep in conversation. "If we only knew," said the millionaire thoughtfully, "what decision Ruth came to. It might have been any of half a dozen. She might have meant to leave the train at Paris and cable to me. She might have meant to have gone on to the south of France and have an explanation with the Count there. We're in the dark, absolutely in the dark. But we have the maid's word for it, that she was both startled and dismayed at the Count's appearance at the station in Paris. That was clearly not part of the preconceived plan. You agree with me, Knighton?" The secretary started. I beg your pardon, Mr. Van Alden. I was not listening." "Daydreaming, huh?" said Van Alden. "That's not like you. I believe that girl has bowled you over." Knighton blushed. "She is a remarkably nice girl," said Van Alden thoughtfully. "Very nice. Did you happen to notice her eyes?" "Any man," said Knighton, "would be bound to notice her eyes." Chapter 21. At the tennis. Several days had elapsed. Katherine had been for a walk by herself one morning, and came back to find Lennox grinning at her expectantly. "Your young man has been ringing you up, Katherine." "Who do you call my young man?" "A new one. Rufus Van Alden's secretary. You seem to have made rather an impression there. You're becoming a serious breaker of hearts, Katherine. First Derek Kettering, and now this young Knighton. The funny thing is that I remember him quite well. He was in Mother's War Hospital that she ran out here. I was only a kid of about 8 at the time." "Was he badly wounded?" "Shot in the leg, if I remember rightly. Rather a nasty business. I think the doctors messed it up a bit. They said he wouldn't limp or anything, but when he left here he was still completely dot-and-go one." Lady Tamplin came out and joined them. "Have you been telling Katherine about Major Knighton?" she asked. "Such a dear fellow. Just at first I didn't remember him, one had so many, but now it all comes back." "He was a bit too unimportant to be remembered before," said Lennox. "Now that he is a secretary to an American millionaire, it is a very different matter." "Darling," said Lady Tamplin in her vague, reproachful voice. "What did Major Knighton ring up about?" inquired Katherine. "He asked if you'd like to go to the tennis this afternoon. If so, he would call for you in a car. Mother and I accepted for you with empressement. Whilst you dally with a millionaire's secretary, you might give me a chance with the millionaire, Katherine. He is about 60, I suppose, so that he will be looking for a nice, sweet, young thing like me." "I should like to meet Mr. Van Alden," said Lady Tamplin earnestly. "One's heard so much of him. Those fine, rugged figures of the Western world." She broke off. "So fascinating," she murmured. "Major Knighton was very particular to say it was Mr. Van Alden's invitation," said Lennox. "He said it so often that I began to smell a rat. You and Knighton would make a very nice pair, Katherine. Bless you, my children." Katherine laughed and went upstairs to change her clothes. Knighton arrived soon after lunch and endured manfully Lady Tamplin's transports of recognition. When they were driving together towards Cannes, he remarked to Katherine, "Lady Tamplin has changed wonderfully little." "In manner or appearance?" "Both. She must be, I suppose, well over 40. But she is a remarkably beautiful woman still." "She is," agreed Katherine. "I'm very glad that you could come today," went on Knighton. "Monsieur Poirot is to be there also. What an extraordinary little man he is. Do you know him well, Miss Grey?" Katherine shook her head. "I met him on the train on the way here. I was reading a detective novel, and I happened to say something about such things not happening in real life. Of course I had no idea who he was." "He's a very remarkable person," said Knighton slowly. "And he's done some very remarkable things. He has a kind of genius for going to the root of the matter, and right up to the end no one has any idea of what he's really thinking. I remember I was staying at a house in Yorkshire, and Lady Clanraven's jewels were stolen. It seemed at first to be a simple robbery, but it completely baffled the local police. I wanted them to call in Hercule Poirot, and said he was the only man who could help them, but they pinned their faith to Scotland Yard." "And what happened?" said Katherine curiously. "The jewels were never recovered," said Knighton dryly. "You really do believe in him?" "I do indeed. The Comte de la Roche is a pretty wily customer. He's wriggled out of most things, but I think he has met his match in Hercule Poirot." "The Comte de la Roche," said Katherine thoughtfully. "So you really think he did it?" "Of course." Knighton looked at her in astonishment. "Don't you?" "Oh, yes," said Katherine hastily. "That is, I mean, if it was not just an ordinary train robbery." "Well, it might be, of course," agreed the other. "But it seems to me that the Comte de la Roche fits into this business particularly well." And yet he has an alibi. Oh, alibis. Knighton laughed. His face broke into his attractive, boyish smile. You confess that you read detective stories, Miss Grey. You must know that anyone who has a perfect alibi is always open to grave suspicion. Do you think that real life is like that? Asked Katherine, smiling. Why not? Fiction is founded on fact. But it is rather superior to it, suggested Katherine. Perhaps. Anyway, if I was a criminal, I should not like to have Hercule Poirot on my track. No more should I, said Katherine, and laughed. They were met on arrival by Poirot. As the day was warm, he was attired in a white duck suit, with a white camellia in his buttonhole. Bonjour, mademoiselle, said Poirot. I look very English, do I not? You look wonderful, said Katherine tactfully. You mock yourself at me, said Poirot genially, but no matter. Papa Poirot, he always laughs the last. Where is Mr. Van Alden? Asked Knighton. He will meet us at our seats. To tell you the truth, my friend, he is not too well pleased with me. Ah, those Americans. The repose, the calm, they know it not. Mr. Van Alden, he would that I fly myself in the pursuit of criminals through all the byways of Nice. I should have thought myself that it would not have been a bad plan, observed Knighton. You are wrong, said Poirot. In these matters one needs not energy, but finesse. At the tennis, one meets everyone. That is so important. Ah, there is Mr. Kettering. Derek came abruptly up to them. He looked reckless and angry, as though something had arisen to upset him. He and Knighton greeted each other with some frigidity. Poirot alone seemed unconscious of any sense of strain, and chatted pleasantly in a laudable attempt to put everyone at their ease. He paid little compliments. "It is amazing, Monsieur Kettering, how well you speak the French," he observed. "So well that you could be taken for a Frenchman if you chose. That is a very rare accomplishment among Englishmen." "I wish I did," said Katherine. "I am only too well aware that my French is of a painfully British order." They reached their seats and sat down, and almost immediately Knighton perceived his employer signalling to him from the other side of the court, and went off to speak to him. "Me, I approve of that young man," said Poirot, sending a beaming smile after the departing secretary. "And you, mademoiselle?" "I like him very much." "And you, Monsieur Kettering?" Some quick rejoinder was springing to Derek's lips, but he checked it, as though something in the little Belgian's twinkling eyes had made him suddenly alert. He spoke carefully, choosing his words. "Knighton is a very good fellow," he said. Just for a moment, Katherine fancied that Poirot looked disappointed. "He is a great admirer of yours, Monsieur Poirot," she said, and she related some of the things that Knighton had said. It amused her to see the little man plume himself like a bird, thrusting out his chest and assuming an air of mock modesty that would have deceived no one. "That reminds me, mademoiselle," he said suddenly. "I have a little matter of business I have to speak to you about. When you were sitting talking to that poor lady in the train, I think you must have dropped this cigarette case." Katherine looked rather astonished. "I don't think so," she said. Poirot drew from his pocket a cigarette case of soft blue leather with the initial K on it, in gold. "No, that is not mine," Katherine said. "Ah, 1,000 apologies. It was doubtless Madame's own. K, of course, stands for Kettering. We were doubtful because she had another cigarette case in her bag, and it seemed odd that she should have two." He turned to Derek suddenly. "You do not know, I suppose, whether this was your wife's case or not?" Derek seemed momentarily taken aback. He stammered a little in his reply. I don't know. I suppose so." "It is not yours, by any chance?" "Certainly not. If it were mine, it would hardly have been in my wife's possession." Poirot looked more ingenuous and childlike than ever. "I thought perhaps you might have dropped it when you were in your wife's compartment," he explained guilelessly. "I never was there. I've already told the police that 12 times. 1,000 pardons," said Poirot, with his most apologetic air. "It was mademoiselle here who mentioned having seen you going in." He stopped, with an air of embarrassment. Katherine looked at Derek. His face had gone rather white, but perhaps that was her fancy. His laugh, when it came, was natural enough. "You made a mistake, Miss Grey," he said easily. "From what the police have told me, I gather that my own compartment was only a door or two away from that of my wife's, though I never suspected the fact at the time. You must have seen me going into my own compartment." He got up quickly as he saw Van Alden and Knighton approaching. "I'm going to leave you now," he announced. "I can't stand my father-in-law at any price." Van Alden greeted Katherine very courteously, but was clearly in a bad humour. "You seem fond of watching tennis, Monsieur Poirot," he growled. "It is a pleasure for me, yes," replied Poirot placidly. "It is as well you're here in France," said Van Alden. "We're made of sterner stuff in the States. Business comes before pleasure there." Poirot did not take offence. Indeed, he smiled gently and confidingly at the irate millionaire. "Do not enrage yourself, I beg of you. Everyone his own methods. Me, I've always found it a delightful and pleasing idea to combine business and pleasure together." He glanced at the other two. They were deep in conversation, absorbed in each other. Poirot nodded his head in satisfaction, and then leant towards the millionaire, lowering his voice as he did so. "It is not only for pleasure that I am here, Monsieur Van Alden. Observe just opposite us that tall old man, the one with the yellow face and the venerable beard." "Well, what of him?" "That," Poirot said, "is Monsieur Papopolous." "A Greek, huh?" "As you say, a Greek. He is a dealer in antiques of worldwide reputation. He has a small shop in Paris, and he is suspected by the police of being something more." "What?" "A receiver of stolen goods, especially jewels. There is nothing as to the recutting and resetting of gems that he does not know. He deals with the highest in Europe, and with the lowest of the riffraff of the underworld." Van Alden was looking at Poirot with sudden awakened attention. "Well?" he demanded, a new note in his voice. "I ask myself," said Poirot. "I, Hercule Poirot," he thumped himself dramatically on the chest, "ask myself, why is Monsieur Papopolous suddenly come to Nice?" Van Alden was impressed. For a moment he had doubted Poirot, and suspected the little man of being past his job, a poseur only. Now, in a moment, he switched back to his original opinion. He looked straight at the little detective. "I must apologize to you, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot waved the apology aside with an extravagant gesture. "Bah!" he cried. "All that is of no importance. Now listen, Monsieur Van Alden, I have news for you." The millionaire looked sharply at him, all his interest aroused. Poirot nodded. "It is as I say. You will be interested. As you know, Monsieur Van Alden, the Comte de la Roche has been under surveillance ever since his interview with the juge d'instruction. The day after that, during his absence, the Villa Marina was searched by the police." "Well?" said Van Alden. "Did they find anything?" "I bet they didn't." Poirot made him a little bow. "Your acumen is not at fault, Monsieur Van Alden. They found nothing of an incriminating nature. It was not to be expected that they would. The Comte de la Roche, as your expressive idiom has it, was not born on the preceding day. He is an astute gentleman with great experience." "Well, go on," growled Van Alden. "It may be, of course, that the Comte had nothing of a compromising nature to conceal. But we must not neglect the possibility. If, then, he has something to conceal, where is it? Not in his house. The police searched thoroughly. Not on his person, for he knows that he is liable to arrest at any minute. There remains his car. As I say, he was under surveillance. He was followed on that day to Monte Carlo. From there he went by road to Mentone, driving himself. His car is a very powerful one. It outdistanced his pursuers, and for about a quarter of an hour they completely lost sight of him." "And during that time you think he concealed something by the roadside?" asked Van Alden, keenly interested. "By the roadside, no. Ce n'est pas pratique. But listen now. I have made a little suggestion to Monsieur Carrege. He is graciously pleased to approve of it. In each bureau de poste in the neighborhood it has been seen to that there is someone who knows the Comte de la Roche by sight. Because you see, monsieur, the best way of hiding a thing is by sending it away by the post." "Well?" demanded Van Alden. His face was keenly alight with interest and expectation. "Well, voilà." With a dramatic flourish, Poirot drew out from his pocket a loosely wrapped brown paper package, from which the string had been removed. "During that quarter of an hour's interval, our good gentleman mailed this." "The address?" asked the other sharply. Poirot nodded his head. "Might have told us something, but unfortunately it does not. The package was addressed to one of these little newspaper shops in Paris, where letters and parcels are kept until called for on payment of a small commission." "Yes, but what is inside?" demanded Van Alden impatiently. Poirot unwrapped the brown paper and disclosed a square cardboard box. He looked round him. "It is a good moment," he said quietly. "All eyes are on the tennis. Look, monsieur." He lifted the lid of the box for a fraction of a second. An exclamation of utter astonishment came from the millionaire. His face turned as white as chalk. "My God!" he breathed. "The rubies!" He sat for a minute as though dazed. Poirot restored the box to his pocket and beamed placidly. Then suddenly the millionaire seemed to come out of his trance. He leaned across to Poirot and wrung his hand so heartily that the little man winced with pain. "This is great," said Van Alden. "Great. You are the goods, Monsieur Poirot. Once and for all, you are the goods." "Oh, it is nothing," said Poirot modestly. "Order, method, being prepared for eventualities beforehand. That is all there is to it." "And now I suppose the Comte de la Roche has been arrested," continued Van Alden eagerly. "No," said Poirot. A look of utter astonishment came over Van Alden's face. "But why? What more do you want?" "The Comte's alibi is still unshaken." "But that is nonsense." "Yes," said Poirot. "I rather think it is nonsense, but unfortunately we have to prove it so." "In the meantime he'll slip through your fingers." Poirot shook his head very energetically. "No," he said, "he will not do that. The one thing the Comte cannot afford to sacrifice is his social position. At all costs he must stop and brazen it out." Van Alden was still dissatisfied. "But I don't see—" Poirot raised a hand. "Grant me a little moment, monsieur. I have a little idea. Many people have mocked themselves at the little ideas of Hercule Poirot, and they have been wrong." "Well?" said Van Alden. "Go ahead. What is this little idea?" Poirot paused for a moment, and then he said, "I will call upon you at your hotel at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. Until then, say nothing to anyone." Chapter 22. Monsieur Papopolous Breakfasts. Monsieur Papopolous was at breakfast. Opposite him sat his daughter, Zia. There was a knock at the sitting-room door, and a chasseur entered with a card, which he brought to Monsieur Papopolous. The latter scrutinized it, raised his eyebrows, and passed it over to his daughter. "Ah," said Monsieur Papopolous, scratching his left ear thoughtfully, "Hercule Poirot. I wonder now." Father and daughter looked at each other. "I saw him yesterday at the tennis," said Monsieur Papopolous. "Zia, I hardly like this." "He was very useful to you once," his daughter reminded him. "That is true," acknowledged Monsieur Papopolous. "Also, he has retired from active work, so I hear." These interchanges between father and daughter had passed in their own language. Now Monsieur Papopolous turned to the chasseur and said in French, "Faites monter ce monsieur." A few minutes later, Hercule Poirot, exquisitely attired and swinging a cane with a jaunty air, entered the room. "My dear Monsieur Papopolous." "My dear Monsieur Poirot." "And Mademoiselle Zia." Poirot swept her a low bow. "You will excuse us going on with our breakfast," said Mr. Papopolous, pouring himself out another cup of coffee. "Your call is, a little early." "It is scandalous," said Poirot. "But you see, I am pressed." "Ah," murmured Monsieur Papopolous. "You are on an affair, then?" "A very serious affair," said Poirot. "The death of Madame Katherine." "Well, let me see." Monsieur Papopolous looked innocently up at the ceiling. "That was the lady who died on the blue train, was it not? I saw a mention of it in the papers, but there was no suggestion of foul play." "In the interests of justice," said Poirot, "it was thought best to suppress that fact." There was a pause. "And in what way can I assist you, Monsieur Poirot?" asked the dealer politely. "Voilà," said Poirot. "I shall come to the point." He took from his pocket the same box that he had displayed at Cannes, and opening it, he took out the rubies and pushed them across the table to Papopolous. Although Poirot was watching him narrowly, not a muscle of the old man's face moved. He took up the jewels and examined them with a kind of detached interest. Then he looked across at the detective inquiringly. "Superb, are they not?" asked Poirot. "Quite excellent," said Monsieur Papopolous. "How much would you say they are worth?" The Greek's face quivered a little. "Is it really necessary to tell you, Monsieur Poirot?" he asked. "You are shrewd, Monsieur Papopolous. No, it is not. They are not, for instance, worth $500,000. Papopolous laughed, and Poirot joined with him. "That's an imitation," said Papopolous, handing them back to Poirot. "They are, as I said, quite excellent." "Would it be indiscreet to ask, Monsieur Poirot, where you came across them?" "Not at all," said Poirot. "I have no objection to telling an old friend like yourself. They were in the possession of the Comte de la Roche." Monsieur Papopolous' eyebrows lifted themselves eloquently. "Indeed," he murmured. Poirot leaned forward and assumed his most innocent and beguiling air. "Monsieur Papopolous," he said, "I am going to lay my cards upon the table. The original of these jewels was stolen from Madame Katherine on the blue train. Now, I will say to you first this. I am not concerned with the recovery of these jewels. That is the affair of the police. I am working not for the police, but for Monsieur Van Alden. I want to lay hands on the man who killed Madame Katherine. I am interested in the jewels only in so far as they may lead me to the man. You understand?" The last two words were uttered with great significance. Monsieur Papopolous, his face quite unmoved, said quietly, "Go on." "It seems to me probable, monsieur, that the jewels will change hands in Nice. May already have done so." "Ah," said Monsieur Papopolous. He sipped his coffee reflectively, and looked a shade more noble and patriarchal than usual. "I say to myself," continued Poirot with animation, "what good fortune! My old friend Monsieur Papopolous is in Nice. He will aid me." "And how do you think I can aid you?" inquired Monsieur Papopolous coldly. "I said to myself, without doubt, Monsieur Papopolous is in Nice on business." "Not at all," said Monsieur Papopolous. "I am here for my health, by the doctor's orders." He coughed hollowly. "I am desolated to hear it," replied Poirot, with somewhat insincere sympathy. "But to continue, when a Russian Grand Duke, an Austrian Archduchess, or an Italian Prince wish to dispose of their family jewels, to whom do they go? To Monsieur Papopolous, is it not? He who is famous all over the world for the discretion with which he arranges these things." The other bowed. "You flatter me." "It is a great thing, discretion," mused Poirot, and was rewarded by the fleeting smile which passed across the Greek's face. "I, too, can be discreet." The eyes of the two men met. Then Poirot went on speaking very slowly, and obviously picking his words with care. "I say to myself this. If these jewels have changed hands in Nice, Monsieur Papopolous would have heard of it. He has knowledge of all that passes in the jewel world." "Ah," said Monsieur Papopolous, and helped himself to a croissant. "The police, you understand," said Monsieur Poirot, "do not enter into the matter. It is a personal affair." "One hears rumours," admitted Monsieur Papopolous cautiously. "Such as?" prompted Poirot. "Is there any reason why I should pass them on?" "Yes," said Poirot. "I think there is. You may remember, Monsieur Papopolous, that 17 years ago there was a certain article in your hands left there as security by a very prominent person. It was in your keeping, and it unaccountably disappeared. You were, if I may use the English expression, in the soup." His eyes came gently round to the girl. She had pushed her cup and plate aside, and with both elbows on the table and her chin resting on her hands was listening eagerly. Still keeping an eye on her, he went on. "I am in Paris at the time. You send for me. You place yourself in my hands. If I restore to you that article, you say I shall earn your undying gratitude. Eh bien, I did restore it to you." A long sigh came from Monsieur Papopolous. "It was the most unpleasant moment of my career," he murmured. 17 years. It's a long time," said Poirot thoughtfully. "But I believe that I am right in saying, monsieur, that your race does not forget." "A Greek?" murmured Papopolous, with an ironical smile. "It was not as a Greek I meant," said Poirot. There was a silence, and then the old man drew himself up proudly. "You are right, Monsieur Poirot," he said quietly. "I am a Jew, and as you say, our race does not forget." "You will aid me, then?" "As regards the jewels, monsieur, I can do nothing." The old man, as Poirot had done just now, picked his words carefully. "I know nothing. I have heard nothing. But I can perhaps do you a good turn. That is, if you are interested in racing." "Under certain circumstances I might be," said Poirot, eyeing him steadily. "There is a horse running at Longchamp that would, I think, repay attention. I cannot say for certain, you understand. This news passed through so many hands." He stopped, fixing Poirot with his eyes as though to make sure that the latter was comprehending him. "Perfectly, perfectly," said Poirot, nodding. "The name of the horse," said Monsieur Papopolous, leaning back and joining the tips of his fingers together, "is the Marquis. I think, but I am not sure that it is an English horse. Zia?" "I think so too," said the girl. Poirot got up briskly. "I thank you, monsieur," he said. "It is a great thing to have what the English call a tip from the stable. Au revoir, monsieur, and many thanks." He turned to the girl. "Au revoir, Mademoiselle Zia. It seems to me but yesterday that I saw you in Paris. One would say that 2 years had passed at most." "There is a difference between 16 and 33, said Zia ruefully. "Not in your case," declared Poirot gallantly. "You and your father will perhaps dine with me one night?" "We shall be delighted," replied Zia. "Then we will arrange it," declared Poirot. "And now, je me sauve." Poirot walked along the street, humming a little tune to himself. He twirled his stick with a jaunty air. Once or twice he smiled to himself quietly. He turned into the first bureau de poste he came to, and sent off a telegram. He took some time in wording it, but it was in code, and he had to call upon his memory. It purported to deal with a missing scarf pin, and was addressed to Inspector Japp, Scotland Yard. Decoded, it was short and to the point. "Wire me everything known about man whose sobriquet is the Marquis." Chapter 23. A New Theory. It was exactly 11 o'clock when Poirot presented himself at Van Alden's hotel. He found the millionaire alone. "You are punctual, Monsieur Poirot," he said with a smile, as he rose to greet the detective. "I am always punctual," said Poirot. "The exactitude, always do I observe it. Without order and method," he broke off. "But it is possible that I have said these things to you before. Let us come at once to the object of my visit." "Your little idea?" "Yes, my little idea," Poirot smiled. "First of all, monsieur, I should like to interview once more the maid, Ada Mason. She is here?" "Yes, she's here." "Ah." Van Alden looked at him curiously. He rang the bell, and a messenger was dispatched to find Mason. Poirot greeted her with his usual politeness, which was never without effect on that particular class. "Good afternoon, mademoiselle," he said cheerfully. "Be seated, will you not, if monsieur permits?" Yeah, sit down, my girl," said Van Alden. "Thank you, sir," said Mason primly, and she sat down on the extreme edge of a chair. She looked bonier and more acid than ever. "I have come to ask you yet more questions," said Poirot. "We must get to the bottom of this affair. Always I return to the question of the man in the train. You have been shown the Comte de la Roche. You say that it is possible he was the man, but you are not sure." "As I told you, sir, I never saw the gentleman's face. That's what makes it so difficult." Poirot beamed and nodded. "Precisely. Exactly. I comprehend well the difficulty. Now, mademoiselle, you have been in the service of Madame Katherine 2 months, you say. During that time, how often did you see your master?" Mason reflected a minute or two, and then said, "Only twice, sir." "And was that near to, or far away?" "Well, once, sir, he came to Curzon Street. I was upstairs, and I looked over the banisters, and saw him in the hall below. I was a bit curious, like, you understand, knowing the way things, were." Mason finished up with her discreet cough. "And the other time?" "I was in the park, sir, with Annie, one of the housemaids, sir, and she pointed out the master to me walking with a foreign lady." Again Poirot nodded. "Now listen, Mason. This man whom you saw in the carriage talking to your mistress at the Gare de Lyon, how do you know it was not your master?" "The master, sir? Oh, I don't think it could have been." "But you are not sure?" Poirot persisted. "Well, I never thought of it, sir." Mason was clearly upset at the idea. "You have heard that your master was also on the train. What more natural than that it should be he who came along the corridor? But the gentleman who was talking to the mistress must have come from outside, sir. He was dressed for the street, in an overcoat and soft hat." "Just so, mademoiselle. But reflect a minute. The train has just arrived at the Gare de Lyon. Many of the passengers promenade themselves upon the quay. Your mistress was about to do so, and for that purpose had doubtless put on her fur coat, eh?" "Yes, sir," agreed Mason. "Your master then does the same. The train is heated, but outside in the station it is cold. He puts on his overcoat and his hat, and he walks along beside the train, and looking up at the lighted windows, he suddenly sees Madame Katherine. Until then, he has had no idea that she was on the train. Naturally, he mounts the carriage and goes to her compartment. She gives an exclamation of surprise at seeing him, and quickly shuts the door between the 2 compartments, since it is possible that their conversation may be of a private nature." He leaned back in his chair and watched the suggestion slowly take effect. No one knew better than Hercule Poirot that the class to which Mason belongs cannot be hurried. He must give her time to be rid of her own preconceived ideas. At the end of 3 minutes, she spoke. "Well, of course, sir, it might be so. I never thought of it that way. The master is tall and dark, and just about that build. It was seeing the hat and coat that made me say it was a gentleman from outside. Yes, it might have been the master. I would not like to say either way, I'm sure." "Thank you very much, mademoiselle. I shall not require you any further. Just one more thing. He took from his pocket the cigarette case he had already shown to Katherine. "Is that your mistress's case?" he said to Mason. "No, sir, it's not the mistress's. At least—" She looked suddenly startled. An idea was clearly working its way to the forefront of her mind. "Yes?" said Poirot encouragingly. "I think, sir, I can't be sure, but I think it is a case that the mistress bought to give to the master." "Ah," said Poirot, in a non-committal manner. "But whether she ever did give it to him or not, I can't say, of course." "Precisely," said Poirot. "Precisely. That is all, I think, mademoiselle. I wish you good afternoon." Ada Mason retired discreetly, closing the door noiselessly behind her. Poirot looked across at Van Alden, a faint smile upon his face. The millionaire looked thunderstruck. You think it was Derek?" he queried. "But everything points the other way. Why, the Count has actually been caught red-handed with the jewels on him." "No." "But you told me—" "What did I tell you?" "Well, that story about the jewels. You showed them to me." "No." Van Alden stared at him. "You mean to say you didn't show them to me?" "No." "Well, yesterday, at the tennis." "No." "Are you crazy, Monsieur Poirot, or am I?" "Neither of us is crazy," said the detective. "You ask me a question. I answer it. You say, have I not shown you the jewels yesterday? I reply, no. What I showed you, Monsieur Van Alden, was a first-class imitation, hardly to be distinguished except by an expert from the real ones." Chapter 24. Poirot gives advice. It took the millionaire some few minutes to take the thing in. He stared at Poirot as though dumbfounded. The little Belgian nodded at him gently. "Yes," he said, "it alters the position, does it not?" "Imitation?" He leaned forward. "All along, Monsieur Poirot, you have had this idea? All along, this is what you've been driving at? You never believed that the Comte de la Roche was the murderer?" "I have had doubts," said Poirot quietly. "I said as much to you. Robbery with violence and murder?" He shook his head energetically. "No, it is difficult to picture. It does not harmonize with the personality of the Comte de la Roche." "But you believe that he meant to steal the rubies?" "Oh, certainly. There is no doubt as to that. See, I will recount to you the affair as I see it. The Comte knew of the rubies, and he laid his plans accordingly. He made up a romantic story of a book he was writing, so as to induce your daughter to bring them with her. He provided himself with an exact duplicate. It is clear, is it not, that substitution is what he was after. Madame, your daughter, was not an expert on jewels. It would probably be a long time before she discovered what had occurred. When she did so, well, I do not think she would prosecute the Comte. Too much would come out. He would have in his possession various letters of hers. Oh, yes, a very safe scheme from the Comte's point of view, one that he has probably carried out before." "It seems clear enough, yes," said Van Alden musingly. "It accords with the personality of the Comte de la Roche," said Poirot. "Yes, but now," Van Alden looked searchingly at the other, "what actually happened? Tell me that, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot shrugged his shoulders. "It is quite simple," he said. "Someone stepped in ahead of the Comte." There was a long pause. Van Alden seemed to be turning things over in his mind. When he spoke, it was without beating about the bush. "How long have you suspected my son-in-law, Monsieur Poirot?" "From the very first. He had the motive and the opportunity. Everyone took for granted that the man in Madame's compartment in Paris was the Comte de la Roche. I thought so too. Then you happened to mention that you had once mistaken the Comte for your son-in-law. That told me that they were of the same height and build, and alike in colouring. It put some curious ideas in my head. The maid had only been with your daughter for a short time. It was unlikely that she would know Monsieur Kettering well by sight, since he had not been living in Curzon Street. Also, the man was careful to keep his face turned away." "You believe he murdered her?" said Van Alden hoarsely. Poirot raised a hand quickly. No, I did not say that. But it is a possibility, a very strong possibility. He was in a tight corner, a very tight corner, threatened with ruin. This was the one way out. "But why take the jewels?" "To make the crime appear an ordinary one, committed by train robbers. Otherwise suspicion might have fallen on him straight away." "Well, if that is so, what has he done with the rubies?" "That remains to be seen. There are several possibilities. There is a man in Nice who may be able to help. The man I pointed out at the tennis. He rose to his feet, and Van Alden rose also and laid his hand on the little man's shoulder. His voice, when he spoke, was harsh with emotion. "Find Ruth's murderer for me," he said. "That is all I ask." Poirot drew himself up. "Leave it in the hands of Hercule Poirot," he said superbly. "Have no fears. I will discover the truth." He brushed a speck of fluff from his hat, smiled reassuringly at the millionaire, and left the room. Nevertheless, as he went down the stairs, some of the confidence faded from his face. "It is all very well," he murmured to himself, "but there are difficulties. Yes, there are great difficulties." As he was passing out of the hotel, he came to a sudden halt. A car had drawn up in front of the door. In it was Catherine Grey, and Derek Kettering was standing beside it, talking to her earnestly. A minute or two later, the car drove off, and Derek remained standing on the pavement looking after it. The expression on his face was an odd one. He gave a sudden impatient gesture of the shoulders, sighed deeply, and turned to find Hercule Poirot standing at his elbow. In spite of himself, he started. The two men looked at each other, Poirot steadily and unwaveringly, and Derek with a kind of light-hearted defiance. There was a sneer behind the easy mockery of his tone when he spoke, raising his eyebrows slightly as he did so. "Rather a dear, isn't she?" he asked easily. His manner was perfectly natural. "Yes," said Poirot thoughtfully, "that describes Mademoiselle Catherine very well. It is very English, that phrase there. And Mademoiselle Catherine, she also is very English." Derek remained perfectly still, without answering. "And yet she is sympathique, is it not so?" "Yes," said Derek. "There are not many like her." He spoke softly, almost as though to himself. Poirot nodded significantly. Then he leant towards the other and spoke in a different tone, a quiet, grave tone that was new to Derek Kettering. "You will pardon an old man, monsieur, if he says to you something that you may consider impertinent. There is one of your English proverbs that I would quote to you. It says that it is well to be off with the old love before being on with the new." Kettering turned on him angrily. "What the devil do you mean?" "You enrage yourself at me," said Poirot placidly. "I expected as much. As to what I mean, monsieur, that there is a second car with a lady in it. If you turn your head, you will see her." Derek spun round. His face darkened with anger. "Mirelle, damn her," he muttered. "I will soon—" Poirot arrested the movement he was about to make. "Is it wise, what you are about to do there?" he asked warningly. His eyes shone softly with a green light in them, but Derek was past noticing the warning signs. In his anger, he was completely off his guard. "I've broken with her utterly, and she knows it," cried Derek angrily. "You have broken with her, yes, but has she broken with you?" Derek gave a sudden, harsh laugh. "She won't break with £2 million if she can help it," he murmured brutally. "Trust Mirelle for that." Poirot raised his eyebrows. "You have a cynical outlook," he murmured. "Have I?" There was no mirth in his sudden, wide smile. "I have lived in the world long enough, Monsieur Poirot, to know that all women are pretty much alike." His face softened suddenly. "All save one." He met Poirot's gaze defiantly. A look of alertness crept into his eyes, then faded again. "That one," he said, and jerked his head in the direction of Cap Martin. "Ah," said Poirot. This was well calculated to provoke the impetuous temperament of the other. "I know what you're going to say," said Derek rapidly. "The kind of life I have led, the fact that I am not worthy of her. You will say that I have no right to even think of such a thing. You will say that it is not a case of giving a dog a bad name. I know that it is not decent to be speaking like this with my wife dead only a few days and murdered at that." He paused for breath, and Poirot took advantage of the pause to remark in his plaintive tone, "But indeed, I have not said anything at all. But you will." "Huh?" said Poirot. "You will say that I have no earthly chance of marrying Catherine." "No," said Poirot. "I would not say that. Your reputation is bad, yes, but with women. Never does that deter them. If you were a man of excellent character, of strict morality, who had done nothing that he should not do, and possibly everything that he should do, eh bien, then I should have grave doubts of your success. Moral worth, you understand, is not romantic. It is appreciated, however, by widows." Derek Kettering stared at him. Then he swung round on his heel and went up to the waiting car. Poirot looked after him with some interest. He saw the lovely vision lean out of the car and speak. Derek Kettering did not stop. He lifted his hat and passed straight on. "Ça y est," said Monsieur Hercule Poirot. "It is time, I think, that I return chez moi." He found an imperturbable George pressing trousers. "A pleasant day, George. Somewhat fatiguing, but not without interest," he said. George received these remarks in his usual wooden fashion. Indeed, sir. The personality of a criminal, Georges, is an interesting matter. Many murderers are men of great personal charm. I always heard, sir, that Dr. Crippen was a pleasant-spoken gentleman, and yet he cut up his wife like so much mincemeat. Your instances are always apt, Georges. The valet did not reply, and at that moment the telephone rang. Poirot took up the receiver. Hello, hello? Yes, it is Hercule Poirot who speaks. This is Knighton. Will you hold the line a minute, Monsieur Poirot? Mr. Van Alden would like to speak to you. There was a moment's pause. Then the millionaire's voice came through. Is that you, Monsieur Poirot? I just wanted to tell you that Mason came to me now of her own accord. She's been thinking it over, and she says that she's almost certain that the man at Paris was Derek Kettering. There was something familiar about him at the time, she says, but at the minute she could not place it. She seems pretty certain now. Ah, said Poirot. Thank you, Monsieur Van Alden. That advances us. He replaced the receiver and stood for a minute or two with a very curious smile on his face. George had to speak to him twice before obtaining an answer. Huh? Said Poirot. What is that you say to me? Are you lunching here, sir, or are you going out? Neither, said Poirot. I shall go to bed and take a tisane. The expected has happened, and when the expected happens, it always causes me emotion.